Oh, hello, everyone, and welcome to the November 2017 Coach Webinar for Early Achievers Coaches. We are so glad that you're able to join us today and look forward to hearing from you during the webinar. As we move through the material today, please type your questions into the chat box, and please select all panelists and attendees or everyone so that we can all see the questions. We will respond to questions as appropriate during the webinar and as they relate to the topic being presented, and there will also be time at the end for additional questions. If we are unable to answer your question during the webinar, we will follow up with you individually at a later date. And if you need technical assistance during the webinar, please comment in the chat box so we can help you out. We are aware of issues with the email invitation, and not all coaches received the invite. So if you did not receive the link, please email Jen and we'll continue to follow up with IT to resolve the issue.
Perfect. So good morning, everybody. This is Jen.
And this is Kelly.
And we are really excited to have everybody here today. This morning, we are going to do a few announcements related to coaching and some professional development resources. And then we're going to get right into creating collaborative partnerships and really thinking about those collaborative partnerships as the very heart of the work that we're doing with educators and providers out in the field. We'll have some time for question and answer at the end, but as Kelly said, please, if you have any questions throughout the webinar, use the chat box, and Kelly and I will be monitoring that, and we will respond to questions either in the chat box or out loud throughout the webinar. And again, we do want to say thank you so much to everybody for your patience. We are working really hard to address the email issues, updating our lists, making sure that everybody's contact information is correct, and really trying to see what's going on with people who aren't receiving emails since we've made the switch to the new system for sending out training invitations and the webinar invitations through the University of Washington system. So thank you. I put my email in the chat box. So if anybody has any questions, or as Kelly said, if you continue to not receive the emails from Cultivate Learning at UW, please let me know and we will continue to address those issues. For announcements, we just continue to want to remind people about upcoming trainings and professional development opportunities through the University of Washington. So as you can see, there is a new coach framework training for those of you who are new coaches and just joining us. That is in Spokane in December. If you click on the link, it takes you right to the registration page. There's also a Fickers Deep Dive in Seattle on December 1st. And for class trainings, there's a pre-K class reliability training in Tacoma coming up in November. If you are interested in seeing kind of a year at a glance for the trainings that will be offered month by month from Cultivate Learning at the UW, go ahead and click on that link on the second bullet, and that takes you right to that month by month training calendar. I see somebody saying that the links aren't clickable through the screen. Thank you. When we send out this PowerPoint, the PowerPoint slides in PDF form, you will be able to click on the links, and those links are live and they'll take you to the registration websites. One more announcement for professional development opportunities upcoming. We still have spots in the Herring Center individualization internships. Those are the 2-day internships at the Herring Center focused on inclusion and individualized strategies for kids with learning and behavioral differences. So we're offering those throughout the year, but here are just a few upcoming dates for November, December, January for CCA coaches, ECAP coaches, and infant toddler consultants. Okay, so getting into our content, just to kind of center us for a minute and think about really why we're coaching, what is our goal when we're using these coaching strategies and forming collaborative partnerships with educators and providers. Really the goal of our coaches using this practice-based coaching framework, using what we know are best practices in coaching and adult learning. So that high quality coaching is really to support the use of effective teaching strategies, evidence-based teaching strategies by the staff members that we're working with, all with the goal of really improving child learning and child outcomes, and meeting the early achievers goal of having all children ready for kindergarten by the time they're ready to enter. So really thinking about that goal of practice-based coaching is to support the educator's use of effective teaching practices in order to support child learning. So thinking about coaching for a minute, coaching is hard work, and really the heart of coaching are those partnerships that we're forming with the providers and the educators that we're working with. So I love this quote that says, probably my best quality as a coach is that I ask a lot of questions and let the person come up with the answers. So really speaking to that partnership and that parallel process of helping educators and providers come up with the answers themselves and supporting them through that process. So now we want to turn it over to all of you and have everybody take a few moments to really think about your best qualities as a coach and use the chat box to share those with your colleagues. What do you think your best qualities are as a coach?
So I see someone entered listener as one of their best qualities. Definitely takes a lot of listening as a coach. Being able to meet providers where they are, building relationships and trust, inspiration, goals and strategies are teacher-driven, relating and connecting, great listening, trustworthiness, motivating, empathy, positive affect, understanding teachers' beliefs and values and how that impacts their practice. Lots of listening and developing understanding, group discussions, asking open-ended questions, discovering teachers' values. Lots of great ideas coming in. Keep them coming. Curiosity. Making connections with teachers and building on that. Being positive. Focusing on those teachers' strengths. Belief that it's important to build relationships, being prepared and engaged. These are all great skills.
These are great
Great
skills.
qualities.
And we will get into a lot more of these characteristics and these qualities and some of these strategies that we're seeing that coaches are using to build these relationships and build these partnerships. We'll get a bit more into some of those specific strategies that you use as well. So these are great. Thank you everybody for sharing. So let's get into these collaborative partnerships. What are they? Why are they important? And most importantly, how do we do it? What do we as coaches do to form those collaborative partnerships? And really, as many of you said, build the trust between we as coaches and providers. So as we all know, practice-based coaching occurs within the context of this collaborative partnership. And right from the Early Achievers practice-based coaching framework, what do we mean by collaborative partnerships? The working interactions between a coach and a provider that provide a safe space for providers to ask questions, discuss problems, get support, gather feedback, reflect on practice, and try new ideas. So these are all really different ways that providers and educators will use us and use our strengths and our knowledge and our resources as coaches to help improve their practice. And one of the things that we all know is that developing these collaborative partnerships is an ongoing process that really does develop over time. So when we're thinking about this practice-based coaching framework and thinking about collaborative partnerships, we know it's a cyclical process that supports teachers' use of effective teaching practices, all with the goal of leading to positive learning outcomes for children. So this practice-based coaching framework is based on years and years of research in best practice for professional development and training for educators, for adult learners. So the difference between practice-based coaching and other models is that practice-based coaching really does focus on increasing the educator's use of evidence-based practices. So collaborative coaching partnerships is really the context in which all of the other components of this framework, creating shared goals and action planning, focused observations, and providing reflection and feedback, those collaborative partnerships are the context in which all those other activities take place. So I think it's important to distinguish between the term partnership and not relationship, because in this framework, we really are talking about partnerships. They're professional in nature, while relationships do take time to develop. You can establish a collaborative partnership with an educator and begin working toward change in their practice while you are still getting to know one another and while you're still developing a relationship versus a partnership. So while it's great to develop a relationship with the educators you work with, it's possible to have a partnership without a relationship or a close relationship.
And so just thinking of the differences between a partnership and a relationship with an educator, we want to hear from you. What do you think those are, the differences between the two? And do you find that it's hard to differentiate between partnership and relationship? And if so, how do you do it? How do you, define those terms as a coach? And so we'd love to hear from you. Please use the chat box to tell us what you believe are some of the differences between a partnership and a relationship, and whether or not it's hard to differentiate between the two and how you do it. I see people responding. One may exist without the other. Partnership may be shared goals. Partnership may mean two or more people working together to accomplish something, whereas a relationship could be two or more people knowing each other and being around each other. Have to work hard sometimes to keep it professional, but it revolves around communicating what you are there for. Partnership means you work together and do it together. Relationships are building trust. Partnership is not the same as friendship. Partnership is goal-oriented, recognizes requirements. Relationship is teaming together. They may have different norms. Partnership is a structured and intention with shared common goals. Partnership is a collaborative process, and relationship is meeting the individual need of the teacher. Partnership is a collaborative and cooperative effort. Hearing lots of collaboration in relation to partnership and
that
moving forward together.
Yeah, and that partnerships really are focused on the goal of the coaching work. That's a great distinction.
Mm-hmm. Relationship is knowing people in a deeper way, what it motivates them, what scares them, and being vulnerable together. Great thoughts. Thank you for sharing. So thinking of all of those qualities and differences and similarities, why do you feel it's important to establish a collaborative coaching partnership? And by collaborative coaching partnership, we're really looking at coach and coachee in this reference. Why do you think it's important to establish a collaborative coaching partnership, and what are some of the characteristics of a strong collaborative partnership? So again, please use the chat box to share. I see shared responsibility in the learning process. Helps the provider to grow, so when you're not there, they feel empowered to keep up the work. There's no partnership if it's only one person's idea. Respect. So Jen, my power just went out, so if you can continue with the chat box. I'm sorry.
Oh, hoping everybody, we were talking about the snow, hoping everybody's safe and warm and somewhere that has power in the snow. So looking at some of the other responses coming through, collaboration is essential as a characteristic. Teachers don't need to be told what to do, but involved in the process of that continuous goal setting and that continuous quality improvement. Ownership, strength, and better outcomes. Equality. Shared ownership, healthy and proactive communication, great, taking the hierarchy out, equal ownership, strong partnership, trust that we are working together for successful classrooms. Great. So we're seeing a lot around that it's shared, that it's equal, that you're not there as somebody who's evaluating and can, telling people what to do, but rather helping the educators and providers identify what their strengths are and what their goals are. Great. So thinking about these characteristics of strong partnerships as working together towards common goals, learning the teacher's why and their motivation, that is a really, really critical part of adult learning theory. So that's wonderful. So we're thinking about collaborative partnerships and really what those characteristics are. You all have really identified most of these. So when we're thinking about collaborative partnerships and strong professional partnerships, think about a partnership that you've had in the past, maybe a partnership at work or one that was formed in the process of some kind of volunteer activity, or maybe a partnership that was also a relationship, such as friendship or marriage. As we think about and discuss the characteristics of a collaborative partnership, think about how your partnership represented or maybe didn't represent these characteristics. So this is the one that we saw most in the chat box, but shared understanding. So we know that this coaching partnership is established for a purpose. Coach and educator should both be very clear about why coaching is taking place and what our goals and outcomes are, both from the teacher and really, again, driven by that educator. So thinking about that shared understanding and making sure that both people, the coach and the educator, are very clear about what the purpose of this relationship, the coaching relationship, is. Another characteristic is that the goal of the partnership is professional development, specifically focusing on increasing the use of effective teaching practices. Another important quality or characteristic of a collaborative partnership is support. So that can come in many different forms as a coach. We as coaches can be resources. We can lend a helping hand when needed. We can be somebody who listens without judgment, and really with the goal of being a true partner in learning, both for the coach and for the educator. Another important characteristic of a collaborative partnership that many of you identified is building that rapport and building the trust between coach and educator. So it's really important to create that safe space where the educator feels free to ask questions, where they feel free to discuss problems, get support, gather feedback, reflect on their practice, and try new ideas. And without trust, coaches or educators won't feel safe to take that risk, which many of you have identified. So collaborative partnerships are not evaluative, they're not judgmental, they're truly partnerships with that goal of improving the educator's practice. Another important characteristic of a strong collaborative partnership, which many of you also identified, is choice. So coaching is not a top-down method of professional development. And while we might be focused as coaches on specific program goals or specific goals that the educator wants to work on, the educator still has many choices about what teaching practices they want to target, as well as when and how to implement them, and when they try them out, and what resources and methods of coaching are most helpful for their learning style. And then many of you also identified this, but another critical characteristic of collaborative coaching partnerships is communication and support. So coaches really work hard to maintain that ongoing communication. And this can take many forms: texts, emails, phone calls, handwritten notes, as well as how to plan for clear communication during the meetings. So thinking about being clear about what the goals of a coaching meeting are, as well as being clear about the communication style of the educator or provider that you're working with. And then the last characteristic of strong collaborative partnerships are celebrations. So always looking for strengths, pointing out what is going right in classrooms, and really helping educators figure out how to build upon what they already know and what they're already doing. So we know that in order for practice-based coaching to be effective, it's important to establish these partnerships. And every educator, every setting is unique, so we also know that every partnership will be unique as well.
Absolutely. And as many of you mentioned it in the chat box too, creating safe space to have those conversations with the educators you're working with is very important too. So looking at coaching as a safe place, a non-evaluative environment, it's really an open conversation. You're maintaining curiosity, asking open-ended questions, getting input from the educator about areas they feel they need to work on and areas they need more support in, creating those clearly defined roles. I think that's especially important if the coach also has other roles within the program. Depending on, it may be that the coach is also the supervisor of the educator. And so that's where it's great to be really clear about which hat you're wearing in that meeting. You know, right now I'm your coach, and so this is how we're looking at things. Or right now I'm coming in as your supervisor, and this is how we're going to look at things. So just being really clear about the roles, about who's going to do what, and being really transparent as you're in the classroom observing and about which role you're using. So all of those things help create a safe place for coaching. Let's see, orientation to coaching. So Jen, if I get ahead, let me know. I can't see the
Okay.
presentation. My apologies. So, so what makes coaching a positive experience for educators? Part of practice-based coaching orientation, helping teachers understand the process, establishing a focus for the professional development of the educator, clarifying roles, clarifying expectations, reviewing program policies and procedures related to coaching specifically, so that there's it's developing that shared understanding of the roles for both the coach and the coachee, and establishing a good sense of an individual educator's strengths, learning style, culture, and needs. So really getting to know each other and getting to know the strengths and needs of the one you're working with. And so this next example is an example of a coaching agreement or a coaching contract. This is a sample that was developed through the NCQTL. And you can see on here, there's some things that as a coach, these are the things that I agree to. And you could go through and you could check and initial the different pieces that as the coach, these are the things you're going to provide to the partnership. And then just taking a moment, like there is a little raise your hand feature at the bottom of your screen. We'd be curious to know how many of you use a coaching agreement currently. And this next section here talks about the teacher, the pieces of the coaching agreement that the teacher agrees to do. So it's a nice way to clarify some roles and to get really specific about here's my role as coach. These are the things I commit to in this partnership, and here's the things as a teacher that you commit to in this partnership. And both parties discuss it, review it, and sign it and date it. Is there anything you wanted to add there, Jen?
No, but we would.
Okay.
Like to, I'm seeing some questions and comments in the chat box around one about the technology. Can't see the raised hands. I actually can't see that as well, so I'm not sure if that's something we haven't activated, so I apologize for that. But people are using the chat box, so that's great.
Oh, great. Great.
So I see some people saying, yes, we use a similar, CCA coaches use a services agreement that contains many of these aspects. And then also that many people have not used coaching agreements or a coaching contract, but are interested in learning more about them. So that's actually what we would love to hear from everybody. So if you have used a coaching agreement, many of you CCA coaches, it looks like you use a similar agreement. Can you share in the chat box a bit more about, one, what does this coaching agreement look like? What does your service contract look like? You know, are there things that are on that service agreement that weren't on these examples? And also thinking about kind of just opening this up if you've used it, or if you're thinking that this might be a good idea. What did this process look like? How did you bring it up with the educator that you were working with? Was it part of some kind of orientation? And then if you've used one, how did it benefit, or how did you think that it affected your coaching relationship? I also want to point out, I see a lot of questions about where people can find this coaching agreement, and I am happy to send that out. It's something that was created by NCQTL as part of their professional development materials on practice-based coaching, and I am happy to send that out when we send the PDF copy of these slides out. I'm making a note for myself right now. Okay, so for those of you who have used these coaching agreements, what did that look like? Was that helpful? What other aspects or activities for the educator or for the coach did you ask people to agree to or have as part of your coaching agreement? I see somebody saying that maybe this occurs verbally as part of a sit-down meeting rather than signing a formal contract, but that regardless of what form it takes, whether it's verbal or written, it's important to define your role, especially if you're playing a dual role, as Kelly said. Maybe you were a technical assistance specialist and now you're moving on to be a coach. Oh, great. So Carol is saying they use a participation agreement, and that's signed by both the provider and the coach at the beginning of technical assistance. And that you're agreeing to help establish a partnership, and that using an agreement or a contract like this really helps clarify the roles of both the coach and the educator. Great. Wonderful. And Mariana, thank you for posting the CCA agreement. So I agree to, as a coach, fully and clearly explain all of the steps of the early achievers journey, provide guidance on goal setting and prioritization, partner with the director and owner and applicable staff to identify strengths and opportunities that are aligned with the early achievers quality standards, give my full direction to the to the director or family childcare owner or staff person when I'm on site, provide information about additional resources and supports that can further assist the participation for pursuing quality improvement goals, keep appointments, return phone calls and emails within 24 hours, and if the need arrives, give at least 48 hours cancellation notice. Great. So thank you for everyone, to everyone for sharing those goals. I see Yvette saying the agreement gives you something to refer back to if a coaching relationship stalls or encounters some bumps in the road. And I think that's a really important point. Having these partnerships or relationships with anybody is not always an easy process, especially when we are talking about improving people's practice. Sometimes that can be a sensitive area. So not only being aligned from the beginning of establishing that partnership on what each person's roles are, but giving us something to look back to and kind of bring us back to center. I see someone asking if we can see the agreement again. So yes, I will back up. Oops. So here is the coach, this coach, what they agree to. So you see the respect and support by being professional, shared development of goals and action plans, really based on what the educator identifies as their needs, as well as the coach's input. Schedule, plan, and facilitate focused observations and coaching sessions. Many different ways of providing support, sharing resources, modeling teaching practices, those focused observations, and then supportive and constructive feedback that are linked to those focused observations. And then really, as many of you continue to identify, remaining supportive rather than evaluative. So now I'm going to move on to the sample coaching contract, the teachers' agreements or the educators' agreements. So really asking educators to engage actively by participating in assessing strengths and needs, asking questions, sharing relevant information, reflecting on practice, listening to questions and feedback, and participating in identifying goals, and collaborating with my coach to determine the steps for achieving those goals. And that's really important, where we've established that an important part of a collaborative partnership is honoring the educator's learning style. So what do I need as an educator to help achieve those goals? Okay. So like I said, when we send out the copy of these slides, we will also send out a version of this coaching agreement. Okay, so Kelly, if you don't have power still, I'm moving to the creating collaborative partnerships slide.
Perfect, thanks, Jen. So we've talked about many of the characteristics that you all shared that are indicative of a strong partnership. And so now let's talk about, so how do you get there? What does it take to build a strong collaborative coaching partnership? Many of you talked about getting to know each other, getting to know the teacher, getting to know their schedule. Coaching should really fit into the teacher's schedule and not be an inconvenience or an added burden. For example, a teacher might prefer to meet at lunchtime because perhaps they have things at the end of the day that they need to get to in their own life. So it might be harder to meet after school, so they want to meet during school. What is their classroom style? It's good to observe before you begin coaching, to become familiar with how the teacher interacts with children, how their classroom is organized. Be sure to let the educator know if and when you plan to visit, and that it's not to evaluate, but just for you to become acclimated to their classroom or to get familiar and just to see how things run. Coaching history, has this educator had a coach before? If so, what worked well? What could have made it better, if you're able to know those things? There are many types of coaches and many methods for coaching, so be sure to clearly explain what your role as coach will be and how practice-based coaching differs from maybe some past coaching experiences that the educator may have had in a similar environment. Sharing personal stories is always a great one. Tell the teacher about yourself and ask about them to develop connections and to better understand one another. We know that finding common ground is one of the bases for all relationships, and trust really starts with getting to know that other person and caring for who they are as a person and respecting them as a person. Connecting to other professional development experiences can help build a strong partnership. So following up in a coaching session with something that was addressed in a training helps ensure that the educator understands the principles so they can connect it back to their teaching practice. So for example, if the teacher attends a training on class, the coach can reflect on it with the teacher and point out ways he or she has observed the teacher implementing some of the dimensions or behavior markers so that the teacher can then build on them. Really establishing yourself as a resource. So your expertise, your experience are valuable resources to the educators you're supporting. You might model practices with permission. It's always great to ask, are you open to some modeling? And then you can model in the classroom in real time some practices for the educator. Brainstorm solutions to problems or share experiences and ideas. And jumping in and helping. Remember that an educator's classroom is their domain. You're a guest. Acknowledge that by offering acknowledge that by offering your help before you jump in. So let them know you're willing to help and offer them that support. Modeling appropriate practice without discussing it in advance might not be welcome, and it might make the teacher feel undermined. So it's always great to establish that, that role ahead of time and check in with the teacher to see, you know, if they're willing to have some hands-on feedback right there in the moment. Let's see. And all in all, letting teachers know they are appreciated, recognizing their efforts and their strengths. We all know that teaching is tough and sometimes a thankless job. Really look for opportunities to acknowledge the important work that they're doing for the children and families that they serve, and highlight their strengths.
Great. And I'm seeing many comments in the chat box as we're talking about strategies and specific ways that we as coaches can begin to establish these strong collaborative partnerships. And we would like to hear more of that from you. So I saw Yvette say, you know, taking advantage of teaching moments and having the coach model and be seen as a helpful member of the classroom. And Hilda said, teachers are given a time to step out of the classroom with her as a coach to discuss their observations. So definitely making space for doing this work is really important. I saw somebody say that Yvette said that they use a coach bio as part of the introductory meetings to help the educators get to know the coaches. I think that's a great strategy as you're forming this partnership and just getting to know one another. But we would love to hear from coaches in the chat box. What else do you do? What other specific strategies have you used to establish a strong partnership with an educator? And I see one question that says, or a comment that says, I'd love to have some modeling success stories and know what strategies coaches use to effectively model practices in the classroom. And that's a great point. And Kelly and I, as we're discussing moving forward with the webinars and not only what the content it will be, but what the format is, we've both agreed that as part of the presentation of the content for each webinar, we are going to begin identifying some coaches who can do sort of a case study or a case presentation and share some of their experiences, successes, you know, what was difficult, what worked. So having you as coaches be a part of presenting the information on the webinars as well. So I've made a note that specifically focusing on modeling, what does that look like to model those teaching strategies in the classroom, we'll definitely make that part of a future webinar.
Absolutely.
Okay, so I see somebody asking, we would like to know strategies other coaches use with getting teachers to meet outside of the classroom. So if anyone has any experience with getting teachers to meet outside of the classroom, if you'd share that in the chat box, that would be great. See somebody saying, we like to start out with what we observed that's going well and the strengths. And right below that, we work hard to share positive observations and really using a strength-based method to empower the teachers and boost their confidence. Well, we'll move forward, and if anybody else thinks of other specific strategies they've used to establish a partnership, or also specifically identifying and helping Yvette with her question about potential strategies that you've used to encourage teachers to meet outside of the classroom. And before we move on, I see somebody saying, I ask what goals educators have for their classroom and students, asking teaching staff what's the best way to communicate. That's great. How do you want me to communicate with you? How do you want me to share my ideas and feedback? What's your preference in your learning style in terms of how many goals do we focus on at a time? I see somebody saying for schools, I need to develop a relationship with the director or the principal to support me in getting regular time with teachers outside of the classroom. Great. Being aware of power dynamics. Starting with positives. Great. Okay, so Kelly, I'm going to move to the next slide. Okay. So now we're going to do a little activity and see some coaching strategies, or see some examples of a coach maybe or maybe not using a strategy to form a collaborative partnership. So we want you to tell us, did the coach make it or break it in terms of forming a collaborative partnership? So this coach says, how did the science experiment go today? And the teacher responds with excitement, it was fantastic. We had the children make predictions about what they thought would happen. So did this coach make it or break it with the question of, how did the science experiment go today? Somebody says, make it. Make it. Yep, lots of make it. Perfect. Yeah, so this question is open-ended. How did it go? And it's specifically related, it seems, to a goal. What was that how did this science experiment go? And you can see that the teacher said, we had children make predictions. So I'm assuming that this goal was directly related to or linked to a goal for the teacher around what the facilitation of that science experiment would look like, what the teacher's behaviors and what their strategies would be during the science experiment. Okay, next one, Kelly.
Okay, so this coach is observing in a classroom, and a child starts having some challenging behaviors with the teacher. And the coach remains sitting in a chair with her arms crossed and occasionally taking some furious notes as the teacher struggles to manage the behavior. Make it or break it.
Lots of break it. So,
yeah.
Which I absolutely agree. What could this coach have done differently as they're working to form a collaborative partnership and be a resource and a support to that teacher? I see somebody saying this would be a time to model. I would have jumped in to assist the teacher and the child. Yep. Ask the teacher if you can help in any way and how you can help. Support the teacher by caring for others so that the teacher can direct her attention to the child. Model or ask if you can step in and assist the teacher. Great, going back to, Emily says, going back to that agreement. Create an agreement prior to class so the teacher expects or appreciates jumping in to help. Great. Bill says, as a coach, this coach should have kept their coaching hat on and stepped in or offered assistance, whether it be with that child or the other children. So that's exactly right, and that goes back to what Kelly had mentioned. We're not there to only observe and evaluate. We are there to be a resource and help out. And just like Kelly said, appreciating that teaching is hard work, and acknowledging that. Let's use this as opportunity either to lighten her load and help out with managing the class, or use this as a learning opportunity. And is it okay for me right now to model some strategies for you? I see a question about it's hard because what should you do if you're observing in the scope of a class observation? Aren't we supposed to not try to intervene during that time? So interested to hear what others' perspectives are about that. So, and I'm not sure actually what the protocol is during a class observation if there is a behavior that is especially challenging or potentially unsafe. So what I'll do is I can follow up with West and see what the recommendations or if there is protocol in terms of class administration for situations that are dangerous. Okay. And so the last, make it or break it. So here's the teacher is standing at their mailbox and she pulls out a children's book with a note card attached that says, I saw this in our lending library and thought of you. You have worked so hard on the construction theme. I thought you might enjoy a new book to share with the class. So that's from the coach. Did the coach make it or break it in this situation? Make it. Yes, this is great. Again, acknowledging your hard work, your progress towards our shared goals, and also let me act as a resource for you. Have you seen this? You think your kids would like it? Keep up the great work. Okay, so just want to remind everybody about some coaching resources that are available through Cultivate Learning at the UW. So we mentioned these in our last webinar, but continuing to look towards the Circle Time magazine, the new resource that's being developed by the staff at Cultivate, a different topic each episode. Using the Coaching Companion, we will be posting all of these webinars and handouts on the Coaching Companion, as well as the Dell Coaching Toolkit, and encouraging coaches to, if they haven't or if they have, to continue to check out the coach consultation tool through Cultivate Learning. We've got a great, really experienced and knowledgeable coach support team who could work with coaches around, you know, specific issues. If there are questions, actually some of those questions about the class, Luis would be a great resource for asking some of those specific questions, and time with him and his contact information is available through the coach consultation website. And now I'd like to turn it over for a moment to Wendy Jantz, who is part of, many of you know, I'm sure, part of the UW Cultivate Learning team.
Okay, thanks, Jen. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. And thank you for mentioning Luis Briseño, who is one of our coach consultants, who, as Jen mentioned, you can access via the Coaching Companion on the Coach Consultation Scheduling link. And there you'll find all of our contacts, or our bios rather, and our calendars to sign up for a consultation phone call. So, but I am actually now going to talk about the next cohort. So we're just about to launch the second cohort of the certificate in practice-based coaching, as you can see by this great slide that Jen has up. And the next cohort will start in winter quarter. We're hoping mid-January. We don't have the exact dates yet, but we think the 12th and 13th. Applications will soon be available for you to apply for this certificate via the Continuum College website. And you would go to that website and then look under certificate programs. It is not quite up and running yet, but very soon for you to apply. Please be sure also to note that if you are interested in applying for a CCA scholarship, that you will need to apply for that separately in addition to applying for the certificate. And as many of you know, we had hoped to start actually last month, and some of you did apply, and your applications are already received, and we will be moving you over into the pool for this next cohort. You don't need to apply again. There is a $50 application fee that you do need to do that is not covered by the scholarship. So that's the information I have, but are there any questions? Or you could put them in the chat box if you have any questions.
Thank you, Wendy.
Sure.
Wendy, this isn't about the coaching certificate, but I see a question in the chat box about regarding the coach consultation support. Which coach might be best to set up a meeting to discuss a file of supporting material? Do you have any idea about that?
Oh, sure. Well, I can, I'm happy to talk about that, but I think also Luis would probably be helpful. But I can answer some of those questions as well.
Perfect. Thanks, Wendy.
Sure.
So, and we just want to go back and remind folks who to contact if they have questions. So for any ECAP specific policy related questions or technical assistance, you would want to reach out to the pre-K specialist who's assigned to the program you're working with if you're an ECAP coach. If you need technical assistance in WELS, you would contact qris@del.wa.gov. And if you need technical assistance during the webinar, Mark McCarty assists with that. And then if you have coaching related questions, you can reach out to Jen and myself, and our emails are in there. Our next webinar will be Friday, December 1st at 9 a.m. And at this time, we just want to open it up to questions from you all, if there's any remaining. Are you seeing any questions, Jen?
No, I'm not seeing any. Well, I see one actually. Will the new WELS system be available soon?
I know it's still in development. I'm not yet aware of a rollout date, but I know it's moving along.
I don't see any other questions coming from the chat box. We will stay on for a few minutes if you have any questions and want to put those in the chat box. But otherwise, thank you everyone for joining us. Again, like I said, I hope everyone is staying safe and warm in our early winter weather. Please feel free, if anything else comes up, to contact Kelly and I with questions or comments about the webinars or coaching, or like we said, when we're moving forward with the webinar content, we really would love to have as many coaches as possible present those case studies around specific strategies. So if you've got some great information to share and you'd like to be featured in one of our webinars, also contact us about that. Kelly,
Thank you, everyone.
Yeah. Kelly, I see a question about, will we have a webinar on the new WELS system so I can learn how to use it?
On the new WA Compass system, I don't know all the details at this time, but I'm sure there will be more information coming out soon. Any other questions, Jen?
Nope.
Well, thank you, everyone.